Hi folks, welcome back to Booze with Nick, full-length edition. I'm not going to go particularly long tonight, but I did want to take just a few minutes to talk about a style of ale that a lot of you probably aren't familiar with, or that if you are familiar with it, you may have a hard time accessing. I'm talking about barley wine or an old ale, depending on what terminology you want to use. The one I'm enjoying this evening is Old Stock Ale from North Coast Brewing in Mendocino, California. So yes, again, I do drink beers that aren't from Oregon. North Coast is one of the older microbreweries operating in America. They opened in '88, just a couple of years after the first batch of breweries in Oregon opened. So they've been around for a long time. They've been perfecting their craft for a long time, and it really shows in quite a few of their beers. I'm a fan of their big old stout, which I'll probably get to reviewing later on this month, and in particular the Old Stock. One thing about old ales or barley wines is they're typically vintage. So this is the 2023, which means it hasn't had time to bottle condition. These ales are huge, we'll talk stats in a second, and they are meant to be laid down, and they will mellow, and they will develop secondary and even tertiary flavors while bottle conditioning. So if you have a proper cellaring space, little disposable income, and a hell of a lot of patience, it really is a worthwhile kind of exploration into the hobby to actually lay a bottle down for 3 or 4 years and then have a very special tasting session with it. Anyways, back to this beer. Back to barley wines in general. What they are is just really huge ales, okay? They're really huge ales made with a sweet but not unctuous or clingy malt character. They're usually hopped enough to keep them from being syrup, but they will generally not exhibit dryness, or you won't know how heavily they're hopped. This one, for example, is clocking in at 34 IBUs, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider the sheer amount of malt in here to get the balance that you have on the palate and those 34 IBUs, they're using a prodigious amount of hops. This one clocks in at 10.9%, pretty standard. These ales generally will start around 9 and go all the way up to the 11 or even 12% range, with 10 to 11 being the average. This one itself exhibits classic, wonderful barley wine aromas. So sticky, dried prunes, perhaps apricots, rich plum. There's something winey about it. Not winey like, but winey in a good way. Notes of port or sherry. I don't know what kind of casks this is aged in. I don't even know for sure that it is cask aged, making an assumption that it is. And on that assumption, I'm assuming a sherry, probably a sherry. If it's not cask aged, I'd be very surprised. On the palate, it's just an explosion of multi-layered, again, deep, rich, dried fruit notes. There's sweetness for sure, but it's not clingy, it's not syrupy, it's very clean and surprisingly light on the palate. Barley wines should be light on the palate. If they feel really heavy on your tongue, they're not hopped enough, and you're drinking malt syrup. So you're basically, in that case, having an improperly made barley wine. This one, like I said, is properly made. These folks have been doing it for a while, and unsurprisingly, they're good at it. I love barley wines. I always have. It's always been one of my favorite styles of ale. It's something that I always look forward to with real anticipation this time of year when things start to cool down. So I want to sit by the fire, wearing a heavy sweater, and trying not to freeze. This is a great accessory for that sort of evening. North Coast actually has fairly good distribution. I think they're available in all lower 48. So there's a reasonable chance that a better grocery store near you, regardless of where you are in the US, may actually get a small allotment of this in, starting probably in mid to late October, and probably being exhausted by mid-November at the latest. Barleywines sometimes fly off shelves, and sometimes you need to have a relationship with the beer steward at your grocery store to get one. So, start passing out holiday bribes. It's that simple. It's worth it. It's important. Do it for the craft. Folks, as always, if you made it this far with me, thank you. Hope you enjoyed the discussion about the king of ale styles, in my opinion. And as always, drink well, live well, and be well.